Hello, everyone. We're just admitting people right now, but we did want to let you guys just know that we're so excited that you can be a part of this lesson planning webinar that we're having tonight. Jonathan's going to take it over for now, and it's going to be recorded for anyone who may pop in late. And so, yeah, we'll just keep admitting people. But Jonathan, you can take it away.
All right, sounds good. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to go through a little lesson planning kind of overview with all of you, kind of give you an idea of exactly what we're looking for, and then we'll have some time for specific questions at the end. So if you have a question about a specific lesson or a lesson idea, then we'll be able to work through that. And so we're going to just kick it off. Lesson planning database is kind of a collaboration between the Arizona Educational Foundation and, of course, ASAP from ASU. And so what I want to kind of start with are like the hard requirements. And the hard requirements for our lesson plans are that they use our template, and that usually comes across pretty clearly. I've had very few lessons turned in that weren't in our template format, but they are a Google slide deck. We went with this because we knew it would be free for everyone to use. We knew that
Hey,
nobody had to
girls.
worry about having Office or PowerPoint or anything like that. Everyone can access the for using a Google slide deck template. One of the really big ideas behind STEM and STEAM is that it's an
Would you
integrated
stop fighting?
concept. And so the idea of it being an integrated concept means that we need to have at least two of the areas within STEM in every lesson plan. And so this is kind of a question mark. This is something that a lot of people end up getting their lesson plans back because of it. I'll get a really great math lesson plan and it has math standards, it has all the pieces required, but it's only math, right? And because of that, you'll end up getting that back and say, hey, I looked at your lesson, it looks great. However, all of the ASAP STEM lesson plans are required to include more than one area from STEM. So the question becomes, what does that look like? So for example, if you have a lesson I was looking at today, it was on anatomy, it was on the stomach, and there was also a math element built into it, talking about volume and graphing. So that has science and it has math. Or you might have a lesson plan where you're running robots through a maze that the students build. And so the robots are really technology, and then the maze that the students build is engineering. And so you have at least two of those content areas in each of those lesson plans. And so that's a requirement. That's the most common reason that lesson plans get sent back for revision is because it's only one content area. And usually it's just science, but sometimes it's just math or just technology as well. The second part is that the standards that you use have to be kind of accepted academic standards. And I'm going to go through all of the standards in just a second, but I want to make sure that everyone understands there has to be two areas, but only one standard is required. If you have a standard from both areas, that is the best. But if you, let's say it's a math lesson that integrates with engineering and you have three math standards, you don't have to have an engineering standard as well. If you do, that's great, but it's not a requirement. So that's kind of like an overview of those basic requirements. And then we're going to go through our template so you can kind of see each piece together. This is a list format of what's required in your lesson plan. And this is every one of these things is already given to you in the template. So there's actually two title slides based on the way that ASU created the slide deck based on my original format. And so you have a title slide, you have a notes and materials slide, you have a place for your standard objectives. An agenda says optional, it's a slide. Really, I'm just looking for you to share with a new teacher who might be looking at your lesson plan, what's this going to look like? Kind of like how long is this going to take? What are the order of activities? So it's a helpful thing to include. Your intro or anticipatory set, this could be whatever, it can be bell work in some grade levels, it can be a video, it can be an activity, but something that gets you started. Your hands-on activity, this is another area of question. All of our STEM lesson plans should be student-facing, hands-on, meaning it's not a lecture. It's not something where the students are just doing a worksheet for the entire lesson. The students have to be actively engaged. So we want to make sure that that's always a part of all of our lesson plans. So that hands-on activity is really important. And then, of course, assessment. I think of the assessment slide as being your suggestions. The teacher can use them or not use them, and it can be any kind of assessment that you might want to include. And we'll get to that assessment slide here in a bit. The last slide is differentiation. It's remediation and enrichment. Again, we're really looking to support a new teacher who might download this lesson to understand how can I make this more accessible for a wider range of students and abilities. So that's kind of the checklist. So the first and foremost, in order for your lesson plan to count towards your requirements, towards your milestones, it has to have all of these pieces, and it has to have at least 2 areas of STEM that are emphasized. So those are kind of like the basic pieces that have to be included in order for you to get credit. Your lesson plans will be submitted via our website, which hopefully you've all been on. This is the ASAP website. This went directly to our STEM lesson submission page. So once you're on the ASAP site and you go to lesson plans, you will see a submit a lesson plan link. You will click on that and it will take you to this page, which is where you will find the template and the sample lesson plan. I made a change today. So when you click on the lesson plan template, it's going to force you to make a copy so that you can look at the template, you can use it, you can write in it, you can make it your own lesson. That's fine. It won't do anything to the original template. So we're going to go through this in just a moment. The other link here is a sample lesson plan. This is going to take you to a sample lesson dealing with wind turbines. And this is nice for you to be able to look at and be able to see kind of what we're looking for. This was originally created before any lessons existed on the database, which we now have 1,000 examples. So we certainly have a lot that you can look at if you're looking for inspiration or have questions. So those are both on this page. And as you will see, you have to fill this out in order to submit your lesson, first and last name and email. Really important that you use the same email address every time you submit a lesson, because that's how we keep track of how many you've submitted overall. We also use the fellowship ID this year as well. But from our spreadsheet, that's the quickest way for us to see it is the same email. So do your best to use the same email when you submit each lesson plan. Then you have the title of the lesson plan. Little things, right? Like make your title of your lesson plan a title. So it shouldn't be a complete sentence. It shouldn't be one word, and it should have capital letter, all those little things. Because if it doesn't, I have to go in and fix that, which is not a big deal, but times 1,000 or 2,000 lesson plans, it definitely adds to the time commitment here. So put your title in there. Your title should not say like ASAP lesson plan number 3, right? This is the actual title that's going to go out to the public when it's published to the database. So if it just says, you know, wind turbine engineering project or whatever the case may be. Lesson plan description, as it says below, it says provide a short preview of the lesson. This can be just some basic information. Maybe it's kind of like the objectives, like why this lesson is used. Whatever you think would be useful for a person to look at and say, oh, that's what this lesson's about. Keep it short, but definitely include it. The link to your lesson plan. So I'm going to pull up a lesson plan. There's a button in the upper right-hand corner that says share. And when this pops up, you're going to get this drop down right here at the bottom. You want it to say anyone with the link is a viewer. And then you're going to hit copy, and it's going to copy that slide deck or that slide deck link, and you're going to paste it into this box. Really important that it's shared correctly. Otherwise, I'm not able to open it. I'm going to try to open it. It's going to tell me I can't. I'm going to hit a send request. You're going to get another email that says, hey, someone's trying to access your lesson. So that's if that's just shared from the get-go. I immediately make a copy of your lesson and close your original. So no changes will be made to your original. No one else will ever have access to your original. And also from your end, if you change anything on your original, I won't see it unless you tell me to go look for it and I can access the original again. But that's just to put your minds at ease that no one will ever have access to your original. They can't mess it up. And that way we can make sure everyone has access to these forever, because a lot of these are shared from district Google Drives, Google accounts, and those aren't often accessible over long periods of time. You're going to check the box for which lesson plan it is, whether it's your first, second, third, or fourth. There's very rare occasions where it might be an other. You can check more than one box for grade level. You can check that it's a K1, 2, and you can just check those 3 boxes. Or you can check one grade level. It doesn't matter. I, I will say your grade level should match the standard. So if you submit a lesson plan and you say, oh, it's a seventh grade lesson plan, and I look at it and you have an eighth grade physics standard, I'm like, this is an eighth grade lesson plan, not seventh grade. So it doesn't matter what grade level you teach. That's not important. It's just what grade level the lesson aligns with that standard. Okay. If you say this is a sixth, seventh, or eighth grade lesson and you have a seventh grade standard, that's fine. Like you could say this is kind of a middle school activity, but there's a seventh grade standard, that's okay. That's a good question. No, lesson plans will not update if you make changes to your copy because your copy is not what we have on our drive. So you have to let me know, and then I can go back in the back end of the website, pull up your original lesson plan, and then copy over any changes to the new version. But no, anything you change after it's been submitted, once I've opened it, will not reflect. And typically I'll let you know. I'll say like, hey, you need to make this change. Just email me when you're done and I'll pull up your original. Subject areas are aligned here on science, technology, engineering standards, so forth and so on. You can be general and just click science, but it's a lot more helpful for teachers if you're like, oh, this is about force, or maybe there's force and energy aspects to this lesson, right? Or maybe it's about earthquakes and you're going to do earth systems and it's also an engineering activity. So you're going to come down here and check engineering and maybe you're using the engineering design process. You want to check everything that applies, but please only check what applies. Occasionally I'll get one and it'll be like everything's checked. And I'm like, that's a great idea, but this is not reflected in the lesson plan. So just be as honest, as accurate as you can be in terms of what applies or doesn't. If you have a question, you can, of course, email me. And I will go in and change these if I need to. Like some people just click the wrong thing, and that's fine. I'll go in and fix it. Or maybe something's not checked, like, oh, this has a great measurement aspect to it. Let me go ahead and add that. That's fine. But it's helpful if you check everything that applies. ELA is here because we know, especially in K6, teachers are not given a lot of time for science. They're not given a lot of time for technology and engineering. And so if we can show that this lesson is integrated with writing and reading, then it's much more likely to be used in K6. In 7-12, we tend to have more dedicated for science and some STEM things, but especially in K6, this is not a requirement by any stretch. I'm going to go to the example for a second. You'll notice on this page, I have science standards, science and engineering practices, and ELA standards. And sometimes I've had a few people say, oh, I just didn't know what ELA standards to include. I'm like, well, you don't have to. This is an example, but it's not a requirement. So again, it's there so you can check these boxes. It's not a requirement. And that's pretty much it. This checkbox means that you're submitting a lesson plan. It doesn't include any pictures that you don't have the rights to share. If you have pictures of your students, put a little smiley face over their face. If you don't, I will. And that's just, more time in the process of reviewing. The other thing that this, is important here, it says, no personally identifying information in your submission, but also you're not submitting something that isn't yours. So it's been a topic of conversation with a number of people. You are absolutely allowed to create a lesson that's inspired by something that you saw. You went to a training, you saw something cool, you found a cool lesson on the internet. Great. You can use it as inspiration, but we cannot publish a lesson that already exists somewhere else. So, Kate, that would be the standard that's appropriate to the lesson. That is completely up to you, Nicole. Either way is fine. We have some lessons that are 45, 50 minutes total. We have other lessons that are like, this is 6 weeks. Oh my gosh. So yeah, we definitely have a full spectrum, and any of those are fine for how long the lessons take to implement. Okay, so that's our website. That's what it looks like to submit a lesson plan. It will give you an immediate feedback that's been submitted. The next you'll hear is from me when I've reviewed it. And it will either be, hey, it's been accepted and approved, or it will be, hey, you need to make these changes. So those are the two emails you might get once it's been submitted. Right now, we don't have a ton of lessons, so I'm kind of on top of things. And we have a real quick turnaround time of less than 3 or 4 days. As we get really busy, it can take a couple of weeks to get lessons reviewed, depending. So in July, we had 700 lessons turned in 1 month. This month, we've had 70. So you can tell there's a big difference. Um, yeah, 45 minutes, especially like middle school science teachers sometimes have 45-minute class periods. So that would be kind of the minimum. And we know that kinder activities, their little attention spans can be short, and they should have multiple activities. So it's not a total like 10 minutes. But yeah, 45 minutes is typically about the minimum. All right. So we're going to go through in depth now. This is the actual template that's just linked directly in here. Yes, these are very similar requirements to last year. You can definitely include a picture of the book. We've also had a lot of people who include a picture and it'll link to a read aloud on YouTube. That's fine. All right. So title page, there's two of them. I'm not sure why, but there are. Please put your title in here and preferably the same title on this page. Your name, the date you turned it in, and what grade level it is. So it might be a first grade STEM lesson or a seventh, eighth grade STEM lesson, whatever the case may be. To give people a little bit of information right off the bat. Notes, I'm going to go over to the example here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. The notes page is entirely to help the teacher who's downloading your lesson, right? Like that's the whole point of all of this is so that we create a database that is useful to teachers. And we know, sadly, that Arizona has a lot of new teachers. I mean, okay, that's a great thing that we have new teachers, but unfortunately, we've lost a lot of veteran teachers. But the reality is, a lot of teachers don't have a lot of experience, and many teachers don't have a lot of experience with STEM. So the more notes you can give them, the more guidance on how to implement this lesson is really helpful. So it could be like the context, right? Where does this take place? Most of you are writing lessons for the classroom, but occasionally we'll have one like, this is for an after school class. That's fine. You can do that. It's just helpful to note it. How are the students going to do this? Are they going to be in small groups? Are they going to do it individually? Right? Maybe what the emphasis of the lesson is. These are some of my notes. This is a lesson that I created. Um, it's just notes to help the teacher know what they're getting into and how the lesson's going to go. The other side is material. List of materials is super valuable for a teacher to be able to say, oh, I have all this stuff, or oh, hey, I need to get this. It is okay to include materials that have to be purchased. Like if you're like, this lesson is based on Zero robots, they're going to need a Zero robot or something similar to do the activity. That's okay. Once upon a time when we created STEM lessons, we wanted all of them to cost $5 or less. And that's still to an extent nice for a teacher to know it's an inexpensive activity. But we also have lots of teachers now who have resources. They have 3D printers and robots, and they have drones. They have all these different things, and they may not know what to do with them. So creating lessons for these resources is great. So you can include any resource here, paid or free, under the materials. If it's a paid resource, you cannot include it for free. So if you paid $20 for this amazing engineering journal on Teachers Pay Teachers, you can link to it, but you cannot include it for free in the slide deck. Now, if you created it and you want to share it, that's amazing. Please feel free to do so. But if it's a resource that's paid for, you can't include it for free. The same thing if it's a resource your school bought, you cannot include that. Now, if it's like a picture or a paragraph out of a textbook, yeah, that's totally fine. But it can't be something that was a purchased resource that's included there. If you have individual specific questions, you can definitely ask. All right. I guess we'll just keep going here with the example, might be easier. Standards. Again, I touched on this a little bit already. It's really important that this is aligned to the grade level and the activity that the lesson plan is doing and to what you say the lesson plan is for. So these are two fourth grade standards. This lesson really works at all grade levels, but this is where the actual standards are. The Arizona Science Standards are found here. I'm going to send you this slide deck because I've linked many, not all, of our standards. And so if you click on this, it'll take you out to the Arizona Department of Education Science Standards page. If you scroll down, you open up the first menu, it's going to give you all the science standards, K through 12 for Arizona. The science standards are broken down into three pieces: science engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and core ideas. The actual standard looks like this. It has an identifier, and has a description. All of the standards are built of a core idea plus a science and engineering practice put together. So you can't list your only standard as a science and engineering practice. You can't just say, in this lesson, you're going to learn about asking questions and defining problems. Is that a science and engineering practice? Yes. Is it important? Absolutely. But it can't be your only standard. Okay. So that doesn't come up too often, but I do, frequently see, especially for engineering activities, because we don't have pure engineering standards in K-8, that a lot of people will just put the science and engineering practices, and then I have to go in and find some stuff, other stuff to add. So that's the Arizona Science Standards, which are great. You can list the science and engineering practices if they're going to be emphasized in your lesson, absolutely, but it can't be your standard, right? That's an important dimension, an important part of the standard. And it's great that you're letting the teacher know that they're using that. Same thing with the cross-cutting concepts. If you can identify specific practices and concepts, I'm going to tag your lesson as a three-dimensional lesson, which means it's emphasizing all three areas: the practices, the concept, and the standard, which includes the core ideas. You can, Christy, you would just say you need to have pivot to do this. And that's okay. It's even better if you can suggest an alternative for those who don't have it, but you can. All I meant is that you can't include something from Pivot for free that your school or district paid for, right? Because that's where we would get into trouble sharing things that are paid for resources. Okay, so those are the science standards. We have terrific educational technology standards based on the ISTE standards. You see it right here. And so there are 7 standards, right? 1 through 7 across all of K-12. They're the same standards, and you see them right here. And they're terrific. They're really important, and some of them are applicable even when you're not using computers. That's what a lot of people think of as technology. But technology can be much more broadly defined. The engineering technology standards are terrific. As you scroll down into the grade levels, I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit. Let's look at standard 3. So this is the standard, right here. And then these are indicators. This is what it looks like in different grade bands. It's important that you include both pieces for a teacher who's never seen these standards before. So it's nice to say, okay, this is standard 3, copy it, paste it into your standards page. And then let's say it's a 3rd grade lesson plan, then you would copy this piece right here and paste it right below the standard. Both pieces are really valuable because it allows the teacher to know what the standard is, what they're working towards, but also what it might look like. Especially some of these will say students in collaboration with an educator. A lot of the K-5 standards realize that students need more support, and then they become independent as they get older. So ed tech standards, they're great. Please use them whenever it's appropriate. For engineering, we have some engineering CTE standards in Arizona. These are for high school. You can use them across any grade level if it's appropriate to show what you're working toward. The standards are these headers. They're pretty broad and general. So investigate the field of engineering to address the needs of a global society. Yeah, definitely. You can use that. Using problem solving, decision making, that's like the engineering design process. So yeah, you could definitely use that. This is a document you can use to indicate the type of activity that's occurring in the lesson because we don't have those real solid, broken down K-8 engineering standards. The other option is to pull from the next generation science standards. Those are national standards. Our science standards are loosely based on them. But what we don't have is this kind of strand of engineering design. And this exists for K2, 3-5, for middle school, and for high school. And so there will always be 3 or 4 standards in each of these. And you can kind of just read through these and you can copy and paste that in as your engineering standard for a lesson. So that's trying to give you different options along the way. So science, ed tech, engineering, math, same thing as science, takes you straight to ADE's website. You can open up the standards. They're all there. Computer science, again, we have some pretty great computer science standards. Not saying that because I was on the committee that wrote them. I'm just saying they're great. But you can kind of open them up. A lot of good stuff in here if you're doing anything with robotics, computer science, coding, computing in general. Computer science standards are a lot more broad than just coding. And so you might find stuff in here that fits your activity, even if it's not coding. So computing systems, hardware, software, networks and the internet, to be digital citizenship type lessons, data and analysis, and algorithms and programming. That's really the coding strand here, and then impacts of computing. So a lot of our lessons on artificial intelligence can be linked to the standards in here as well. So that's our computer science standards document. And then these are additional ones. Please feel free if they fit. We've had some really great lessons that integrate art, that integrate language arts, that integrate social studies, PE, anything along those lines. Standards are linked here. And then there's a handful of other ones. This is just a general page. This lists all of them. If you want to grab standards from other areas that fit, please feel free to do so. The standards are really important because that's how we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck with these lessons. The teachers are going to be able to use them if they're linked to standards. So those are all there. Objectives, you all know what an objective is. Please include at least one. It's helpful to write it as an objective, like what the students will be able to do by the end of the lesson. But you have your options there. I see this as kind of a suggestion page for the teacher because they're probably going to have to rewrite it in their school's desired format anyway. Agenda, again, if we go to the example here, it's supposed to be real brief. Like, what are we doing? Oh, we're going to talk about what a wind turbine is. We're going to read The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. We're going to engineer a wind turbine, and we're going to share or present. Real simple, shouldn't take very long. If you want to write down how long each part is, that's even better. It's not a requirement. It's all just meant to make this useful for a teacher who downloads the lesson. Okay. Intro, driving question, opening. This could be, again, could be bell work. Like, what is a wind turbine? It's a question. There's pictures. I have students look at it. Maybe I watch a video of a wind turbine working and moving as a phenomenon and say, okay, what do you notice? Right? What do you wonder? Those are kind of the key ideas that come out of our science training. And they can make observations and they can go from there. So it's just something to kick off the lesson. Not real, I'm not looking for anything specific other than that you've included it. Your hands-on activity, you should suggest what the group structure is. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4 kids in a group? Step-by-step instruction. There's two aspects to this. Ideally, you would include step-by-step instructions on the slide for the student. And then in the notes at the bottom, you might include instructions for the teacher. I would love for all of our lessons to be student-facing, meaning a teacher can take this and in 3 minutes put it on their board in front of students and go through the lesson. It's not a requirement, but how great would it be if more and more of our lessons were built that way? So if you look at the lesson, like this is a slide that would be in front of students. This is a slide that would be in front of students. This would be in front of students, and it has a link here so you can listen to the book, right? This is for students. It has a timer. And again, this is an example. I have your constraints. I have little basic information here in addition to what the teacher's telling. And then I've got notes for the teacher here, including videos where the teacher can go say, I have no idea what I'm doing. Great, here's a video for the teacher to see how this works. This is a lot. And I understand that you're extremely busy and I get it. But the more we can include in here, the more useful your lesson plan will be. So that's kind of how I envision these lesson plans, is that they also serve the purpose of being in front of students. Same thing, this is for students, right? How do we assess our work? Field test, iterate, and then there's notes for the teacher at the bottom. That's in an ideal world, your lessons will be student-facing slides and teacher notes at the bottom, where needed. Maybe there's no notes needed, maybe it's really obvious, that's fine, but where needed. Assessment, same thing. These are assessment questions for the students. There's a note for the teacher, right? You don't have to have ELA assessment. That just happens to be that this is an integrated lesson. Whatever you can suggest to the teacher that makes a good assessment. And it could be a quiz, or it could be an essay, or it could be creating your own podcast, or creating a video and taking pictures and voiceover in a presentation and getting on Canva and using artificial intelligence to generate images. Like, there's a lot more to assessment than just the traditional stuff. And we really have an opportunity to help teachers, learn some new ideas. And then finally, differentiation. Again, when this comes to me, I always hide this slide. I can't see it, so I'm not in edit mode right now. That way a student never sees this, because I don't ever want a student to feel like, oh, I got the easy version of this, or whatever the case may be. Remediation, how can you make this lesson more accessible to students who are struggling or maybe haven't learned everything they need to be successful yet? And extension and enrichment, how can I push students to go deeper? It should not be like, instead of 10 questions, ask them 20. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for like, hey, you aced the 10 questions. How does it actually apply in your life, right? How can we actually use it? Could you actually charge a device with your wind turbine, right? So enrichment and extension, that's how you go deeper in real world content, okay? And that's it. This is, an example lesson, 13 slides. The minimum is 10 to get all the pieces in. You can move stuff around. It doesn't have to be in this order. It does need to include all of these pieces. Okay, so that's a requirement. Can it include other things? Absolutely. I've had lessons that are like 50 slides. It takes a really long time to review them, but that's okay because they tend to be really great. And so it can be as long as it needs to be to get this lesson over to teachers, but it does need to hit these minimum pieces.
Thank you for everyone who was able to join.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you.
Right.